Srila Prabhupada ki. Reading from Srila Prabhupada Lilamrta. Only he could lead them. Bhaktivedanta Swami rose from bed and turned on the light. It was 1 a.m. Although the alarm had not sounded and no one had come to wake him, he had risen on his own. The apartment was cold and quiet, wrapping his chadar around his shoulders. He sat quietly at his makeshift desk, a trunk filled with manuscripts, and in deep concentration chanted the Lilamrta on his beads. After an hour of chanting, Bhaktivedanta Swami turned to his writing. Although 2 years had passed since he had published a book, the third and the final volume of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he had daily been working, sometimes on his translation and commentary of the second canto, but mostly on Bhagavad Gita. In the 1940s in India, he had written an entire Bhagavad Gita translation and commentary, but his only copy had mysteriously disappeared. Then, in 1965, after a few months in America, he had begun again, starting with the introduction, which he had composed in his room on 72nd Street in New York. Now, thousands of manuscript pages filled his trunk, completing his Bhagavad Gita. If his New York disciple, Hayagriva, formerly an English professor, could have did it, and if some of the other disciples could get it published, that would be an important achievement. But publishing books in America seemed difficult, more difficult than in India. Even though in India he had been alone, he had managed to publish 3 volumes in 3 years. Here in America, he had many followers, but many followers meant increased responsibilities. And none of his followers as yet seemed seriously inclined to take up typing, editing, and dealing with American businessmen. Yet, despite the dim prospect for publishing his Bhagavad Gita, Bhaktivedanta Swami had begun translating another book, Chaitanya Charitamrita, the principal Vaishnava scripture on the life and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Putting on his reading glasses, Swamiji opened his books and turned on the dictating machine. He studied the Bengali and Sanskrit texts, then picked up the microphone, flicked the switch to record, fastening on a small red light, and began speaking. While the Lord was going, chanting and dancing, he spoke no more than a phrase at a time, flicking the switch, pausing, and then dictating again. Thousands of people were following him. And some of them were laughing, some were dancing, and some were singing. Some of them were falling on the ground, offering obeisances to the Lord, speaking and pausing, clicking the switch on and off. He would sit straight, sometimes gently rocking and nodding his head as he urged forward his words. Or he would bend low over his books, carefully studying them through his reading glasses. An hour passed, and Swamiji walked on. The building was dark except for Swamiji's lamp, and quiet except for the sound of his voice and the click and hum of the dictating machine. He wore a faded peach turtleneck jersey beneath his grey wool chador. And since he had just risen from bed, his saffron dhoti was wrinkled, without having washed his face or gone to the bathroom. He sat absorbed in his work. At least, for these few rare hours, the street and the Radha Krishna temple were quiet. This situation at night, with the surrounding quiet and him at his transcendental literary work, was not much different from his early morning hours in his room at the Radha Damodara temple in Vrindavan, India. There, of course, he had no dictating machine, but he had worked during the same hours and from the same text, Chaitanya Charitamrita. Once he had begun a verse-by-verse translation with commentary. Another time, he had written essays on the text. Now, having just arrived in his corner of the world, in this corner of the world, so remote from the scenes of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, he was beginning the first chapter of a new book. He was beginning the first chapter of a new English version of Chaitanya Charitamrita. He called it Teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He was following what had become a vital routine in his life, rising early and writing the Parampara message of Krishna consciousness, putting aside all other considerations. Disregarding present circumstances, he would merge into the timeless message of transcendental knowledge. This was his most important service to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. The thought of producing more books and distributing them widely inspired him to write every night and translate. Bhaktivedanta Swami worked until dawn. Then he stopped and prepared himself to go down to the temple for the morning meeting. Though some of the New York disciples had objected, Swamiji was still scheduled for the Manta rock dance at the Avalon Ballroom. It wasn't proper, they had said, for the devotees out in San Francisco to ask their spiritual master to go to such a place. It will mean amplified guitars, pounding drums, wild light shows, and hundreds of drugged hippies. How could his pure message be heard in such a place? But in San Francisco, Mukunda and others had been working on the mantra rock dance for months. It would draw thousands of young people, and the San Francisco Radha Krishna temple stood to make thousands of dollars. So, although among his New York disciples, Swamiji had expressed uncertainty, he now said nothing to deter the enthusiasm of his San Francisco followers. Some Spitstra. Mukunda's friend and one of the Manta Rock organizers explained the idea to Hayagriva, who had just arrived from New York. There is a whole new school of San Francisco music opening up. The Grateful Dead have already cut their first record. Their offer to do this dance is a great publicity boost just when we need it. But Swamiji says that even Ravi Shankara is Maya. Hayagriva said, "Oh, it's all been arranged." Sam assured him, all the bands will be on stage, and Allen Ginsberg will introduce Swamiji to San Francisco. Swamiji will talk and then chant Hare Krishna with the bands joining in. Then he leaves. There should be around 4,000 people there. Bhaktivedanta Swami knew he would not compromise himself. He will go, chant, and then leave. The important thing was to spread the chanting of Hare Krishna. If thousands of young people gathering to hear rock music could be engaged in hearing and chanting the names of God, then what was the harm? As a preacher, Bhaktivedanta Swami was prepared to go anywhere to spread Krishna consciousness. Since chanting Hare Krishna was absolute, one who heard or chanted the names of Krishna, anyone, anywhere, in any condition, could be saved from falling to the lower species in the next life. These young hippies wanted something spiritual. But they had no direction. They were confused, accepting hallucinations as spiritual visions. But they were seeking genuine spiritual life, just like many of the young people on the Lower East Side. Bhaktivedanta Swami decided he would go. His disciple wanted him to. And he was their servant, and the servant of Lord Chaitanya. Mukunda, Sam, and Habe Cohen had already met with rock entrepreneur Chet Helms, who had agreed that they could use his Avalon Balloon and that if they could get the bands to come, everything above the cost for the groups, the security, and a few other basics will go as profit for San Francisco Radha Krishna Temple. Mukunda and Sam had then gone calling on the music groups, most of whom lived in the Bay Area, and one after another, the exciting new San Francisco rock bands, the Grateful Dead, the Moby Grape, Big Brother, and the Holding Company, Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver, Messenger Service had agreed to appear with Swami Bhaktivedanta for the minimum wage, $250 per group, dollars. And Allen Ginsberg had agreed. The lineup was complete. On the night of the Mantra Rock Dance, people lined up all the way down the street and around the block, waiting for tickets at $2.50 a piece. Attendance would be good, a capacity crowd, and most of the local luminaries were coming. LSD pioneer Timothy Leary arrived and was given a special seat on stage. Hariyo. Swami Kirtananda came carrying a tambura, a man wearing a top hat and a suit with a silk satin that said, Francisco arrived, claiming to be the mayor. At the door, Mukunda stopped a respectably dressed young man who didn't have a ticket. But then someone tapped Mukunda on the shoulder. Let him in. It's all right. He is Osli. Mukunda apologized and submitted, allowing Augustus Osli Stanley II, fall hero and famous synthesizer of LSD, to enter without a ticket. Almost everyone who came wore bright or unusual costumes, tribal robes, Mexican ponchos, Indian kurtas, ghost eyes, feathers, and beards. Some hippies brought their own flute, lute, gourds, drums, rattles, horns, and guitars. And it's a showdown. It's a heavy showdown. The Hell's Angels, dirty heads wearing jeans, boots, and demon jackets, and accompanied by their women, made their entrance carrying chains, smoking cigarettes, and displaying their regalia of German helmets, emblazoned emblems, and so on, everything but their motorcycles, which they had parked outside. The devotees began a warm-up kirtan on stage, dancing the way Swamiji had shown them. Incense poured from the stage and from the corners of the large bathroom. And although most in the audience were high on drugs, the atmosphere was calm. They had come seeking a spiritual experience. As the chanting began, very melodiously, some of the musicians took part by playing their instruments. The light show began. Strobe light flashed. Colored balls bounced back and forth to the beat of the music. Large blobs of pulsing color spluttered across the floor, walls, and ceiling. A little after 8 o'clock, Moby Grape took the stage with heavy electric guitars, electric bass, and 2 drummers. They launched into their first number. The large speakers shook the ballroom with their vibrations, and a roar of approval rose from the audience. Around 9:30, Swamiji left his Frederick Street apartment and got into the back seat of Harvey's Cadillac. He was dressed in his usual saffron robes, and around his neck he wore a garland of gardenias, whose sweet aroma filled the car. On the way to the Avalon, he talked about the need to open more centers. At 10 o'clock, Swamiji walked up the stairs of the Avalon, followed by Kirtananda and Nanachal. As he entered the ballroom, devotees blew conch shells. Someone began a drum roll, and the crowd departed down the center, all the way from the entrance to the stage, opening a path for him to walk, with his head held high. Swamiji seems to float by as he walked through the standing or the strange milieu, making his way across the bathroom floor to the stage. Suddenly, the light show changed. Pictures of Krishna and his pastimes flashed onto the wall. Krishna and Arjuna riding together on Arjuna's chariot. Krishna eating butter. Krishna subduing the wild wind demon. Krishna playing the flute. As Swamiji walked through the crowd, everyone stood, applauding and cheering. He climbed the stairs and seated himself softly on the waiting cushion. The crowd quieted. Looking over at Allen Ginsberg, Swamiji said, "You can speak something about the mantra." Allen began to tell of his understanding and experience with the Hare Krishna mantra. He told how Bhaktivedanta Swami had opened a storefront on 2nd Avenue and had chanted Hare Krishna in Topskin Square Park. And he invited everyone to the Frederick Street Temple. I especially recommend the newly morning kirtans, he said, for those who, coming down from LSD, want to stabilize their consciousness on re-entry. Swamiji spoke, giving a brief history of the mantra. Then he looked over at Aline again. You may chant. Alan began playing his harmonium and chanting into the microphone, singing the tune he had brought from India. Gradually, more and more people in the audience caught on and began chanting. As the mantra continued and the audience got increasingly enthusiastic, musicians from the various bands came on stage, joined in. Ranachod, a fair drummer, began playing Moby Graves' drums. Some of the bass and other guitar players joined in as the devotees and a large group of hippies mounted the stage. The multicolored oil slicks pulsed, and the balls bounced back and forth to the beat of the mantra, now projected onto the wall. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. As the chanting spread throughout the hall, some of the hippies got to their feet, held hands, and danced. Allen Ginsberg. We sang Hare Krishna all evening. It was absolutely great. An opening thing. It was the height of the Haight Ashbury spiritual enthusiasm. It was the first time that there had been a music scene in San Francisco where everybody could be a part of it and participate. Everybody could sing and dance rather than listen to other people sing and dance. Janaki. People didn't know what they were chanting for. But to see that many people were chanting, even though most of them were intoxicated, made Swamiji very happy. He loved in see the people chanting. Hayagriva. Standing in front of the bands, I could hardly hear. But above all, I could make out the chanting of Hare Krishna, building steadily. On the wall behind, a slide projected a huge picture of Krishna in a golden helmet with a peacock feather, a flute in his hand. Then Swamiji stood up, lifted his arm and began to dance. Jai. He gestures for everyone to join him, and those who were still seated stood up and began dancing and chanting and swaying back and forth, following Swamiji's gentle dance. That's why he went there, and he's doing it. Roger Segal. The ballroom appeared as if it was a human field of heat blowing in the wind. It produced a calm feeling in contrast to the usual Avalon ballroom atmosphere of gyrating energies. The chanting of Hare Krishna continued for over an hour, and finally everyone was jumping and yelling, even crying and shouting. Someone placed a microphone before Swamiji, and his voice sounded strongly over the powerful sound system. The tempo quickened. Swamiji was perspiring profusely. Kirtananda insisted that the kirtan stop. Swamiji was too old for this, he said. it might be harmful. But the chanting continued, faster and faster, until the word of the mantra finally became indistinguishably amidst the amplified music and the chorus of thousands of voices. Then suddenly it ended, and all that could be heard was the loud hum of the amplifiers and Swamiji's voice ringing out, offering obeisances to his spiritual master. Om Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Paribrajika Chaira Stotara Sutta Sisimat Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaja Ki! In the public. All glorious assembled devotees. Swamiji made his way off stage, through the heavy smoke and crowd, and down the front stairs, where Krishnananda and Ranachal close behind him. Allen announced the next rock group. As Swamiji left the ballroom and the appreciative crowd behind, he commented, "This is not a place for a brahmachari." Hare Krishna. Everything was there. All right, Hare Krishna. That's the beginning of Krishna consciousness. What we are having now, this is how it started. That's how it started. It didn't start like this. It started from there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Radhe Radhe. Gora Bhakti Vrinda ki jai.